you got to just give it another shot. So I'm paddling into this wave, and all I remember it was almost like you get these flashbacks of just like as I'm paddling into the wave. In my head, I'm thinking flying head first over the falls again. It's very hard to like get yourself back into the mental space of like making the wave when something bad happened like that. So I'm just thinking in my head, I just need to get down the face of this wave. And I remember it went from the first wave being the most like horrific, just stuck in the lip, to just flying head first, to like being connected to the wave, like the easiest drop you could ever. It was like the polar opposite, the easiest drop you could ever imagine, riding to the bottom, make a nice bottom turn off my toes, and then you just see the whole thing like lining up down the line, and I just got to like stand in this giant barrel, and it was just like this perfect tube. I don't know if I would have been able to make it out of it, but just being able to stand in this big blue barrel, and like, yeah, I don't know, it was a really cool experience.
Welcome to Speaking from Water, episode 39, in collaboration with A Classic. Today we have the one and only Jack Akrop. He is a legendary big wave surfer, lifeguard, community man, and podcast host with A Classic on our program today, and we're super, super stoked to have him. Jack, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Bro, it's so great to have you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you come in very high regard from many people. I did my homework on you, and yeah, I'm really excited to get into a lot of different things with you. But first of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, doing really good. I was just up in Mammoth Lakes, doing some Mammoth Lakes, California, doing some snowboarding, and I saw that the buoys came up overnight and rushed down to Mavericks, about a 7-hour drive, and didn't get any good waves, but got like a nice little windy, stormy El Nino session right before dark. And so, yeah, I'm stoked, man. I'm kind of over the moon right now. I was kind of thinking just how cool California is in that regard, like ski, and then the next day you can go ride big waves. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool, pretty special place.
Yeah, you're living large. And I was checking out your footage you're clipping from your Mammoth Lakes experience. It looks like you guys have gotten a lot of weather. It looks like you got a lot of snow from that. How was that trip?
It was a good trip, man. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad I got over there pretty early, because I think a lot of the roads kind of closed into Mammoth. We've been just getting these like that was, I guess, kind of like an atmospheric river. So where I'm from in Santa Cruz, it was pretty much just torrential downpour and rivers breaking out, flooding. So kind of escaped that, and I was just in the fun, light, powdery fluff instead.
And
yeah,
I understand,
overall good trip.
Sick. I understand you're coming off a Achilles injury. Is that right?
Yeah, I tore my Achilles 9 months ago. So
how are you feeling?
It's gotten a lot better. Yeah, snowboarding was kind of the last test, because that's how I originally injured it, was snowboarding. So to get it back out there, and it's still a little sore and funky after like a long day of riding, but it's gotten a lot better. So
what's your method on the mountain? Are you a park guy or backcountry? Like what do you love?
So I used to kind of like both. I used to really love the park, and that's actually how I got injured last year in Mammoth and during the springtime. So I don't want to say I'm completely done with the park, but I'm starting to kind of set my sights on backcountry stuff and powder. I would definitely say like powder riding is more my passion, and it's a lot lower impact on the body. So
what did you do to injure yourself in the park?
I was just hitting a jump, and I mistimed the speed. It was kind of a slushy day, so it was really slow. So I kind of overcompensated and just went really fast, and I overshot this jump and just like landed down past the landing on the flats and just completely blew out my Achilles. So
bummer, bro.
Yeah, it was a bummer. So I look at that and I was like, I don't really want to spend another 9 months out of the water and off a snowboard. So maybe we'll just go easy on the park riding.
Well, congratulations on re-engaging the monster and coming out healthy, and then going to a new monster there in Mavericks. What was that session like coming home recently?
So yeah, it was like I said, the buoys kind of popped up, and it was kind of hard to gauge. This was like one of the outer buoys, maybe 20 hours away or something. But I saw that, it wasn't going to be anything huge, but it was going to be breaking. And I always get the FOMO as soon as I see that there's any sort of swell at Mavericks. It's right up the road from my house. I mean, not super close, but about an hour away, so close enough. So I kind of drove down. Like I said, it takes about 7 hours. So I was just kind of chomping at the bit to get there, just freaking out, watching the camera as I was driving. I was like, wait, I can't be doing this. And then I got there, and it was just two of my friends out there. And by then, the wind had completely like blown the thing apart, and it wasn't a great session. But I paddled out right before dark, maybe 30 minutes before dark, and got one wave. And it's California dream, man.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't the most epic session, it was like it was cool to just be riding snow and then come back and be able to go surf.
So looking at
I'm
your
grateful.
history, bro, like looking at your history, you've got a crazy life going on. You first don't really get into surfing, from what I understand, until you're like 20. Is that right?
So I was a boogie boarder until I was about 18 years old. So I was always kind of in the water, but I was more into like land sports, playing baseball, soccer. Um, I boogie boarded and whatnot. But yeah, I didn't get into surfing until I was about 18 years old. So I think
So
it's kind of lit a fire underneath me, though. Just understanding that I'm a little bit behind the curve, and I think it's kind of forced me to work super hard and try to make up lost time, really.
well, like boogie boarding in Australia is huge. It's not that big in America. What was it that got you into boogie boarding? And you were boogie boarding big waves. I mean, Santa Cruz has just a list of spots that are consequential. And from what I understand, you were out there on the boogie board. What was it that made you step away from that? Because a lot of people, when they get into something like that, they get passionate about it. They don't really want to go to the stand-up surfing because it's a kind of a different culture. Well, tell us how that ride of thought evolved.
Yeah, so I started out, I was always, which is pretty interesting. I was always really scared of the ocean, to be honest. I started off doing junior lifeguards, so nippers in Australia, and that was a big thing I did every summer. And then around the age of 5 or 6, I met my best friend Quinn. We kind of just ran into each other at school, and Quinn was, just starting to get into boogie boarding, and he was real fearless. And so, we started hanging out, and I started, spending the night at his house on the weekends, and he would go down and boogie board this wave, First Jetty in Santa Cruz. It's just like this hollow little wave that breaks right behind a set of rocks, and it's kind of the perfect spot to learn, but also to kind of to hone in on boogie boarding. And so, yeah, it's just like this kind of slow process from 6 years old boogie boarding, and then we'd start kind of moving. The way Santa Cruz is set up, it's kind of, I imagine a lot of places are like this, but you got Capitola Beach, which is kind of like the epicenter of beginner surfing, right? It's about the easiest wave in town, and it's also the farthest in the bay. So it's like it's the most tucked away from all the swell. And then you just slowly move your way up the bay all the way to the, you know what I mean? And then it's, you keep going all the way up to Mavericks, and that's another story. But essentially, I started out at First Jetty, kind of just worked my way up, and then, as I said, I was doing a lot of surf lifesaving sport. So we can get into a little bit of that, but uh, and I was starting to get really into downhill skateboarding, and I was also really into snowboarding. So I've always loved board sports, and it just seemed like the general progression because I was on a boogie board, I was laying down, and I was having a lot of fun. I think I definitely tribute a lot of the big wave stuff to boogie boarding, just getting comfortable, getting rolled around in shore breaks, and looking for different kind of slabs and stuff. So I definitely think boogie boarding had a big part in my upbringing. But I was snowboarding and I was downhill skateboarding, so it was just this. Okay, I gotta stand up now. Like, what would it be like to ride those same waves, but standing up? So that was kind of the progression for me, really.
Now, when was it that you got on the surfboard? Where did you start paddling out there in Santa Cruz?
So same spot. I remember I think it was right after I graduated high school, maybe. So I was about 17 years old. I went out to Capitola, the place that I originally learned how to boogie board. And on a bigger day, there's a nice left that breaks out there. And I had a 6'9" Pearson arrow that my cousin gave me. When he gave it to me when I was 6 years old. And I probably left that thing was in my garage for 11 years. And finally, one day I was just like, I'm going to take this thing out and give it a try. And I can just remember vividly, like riding some nice lefts, and I was like, I hate to say it, I do love boogie boarding, but it's one of those things that for me, at least, as soon as I stood up on a surfboard, it was just like, no looking back. It was like, oh my God, the amount of speed you could get on standing up. And, like I said, I definitely love boogie boarding, but surfing offered a different level of speed, being able to pump and make through those sections that on the boogie board, you were just getting stuck behind, So for me, it was like, well, this is it. I'm going to surf now.
Yeah, the aesthetic of surfing is so different than the aesthetic of bodyboarding. And we had Ryan Hardy, the big time
Nice.
bodyboarder, on the program a couple weeks ago, and man, he blew my mind. And really, what it was when you're traveling on a bodyboard, your whole body's feeling the water, and that's something that really never occurred to me. So you're feeling that water, and as a bodyboarder, as you are, and a surfer now as you are, can you kind of contrast those two conceptual aesthetics for us?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So yeah, Ryan Hardy's definitely somebody I looked up to growing up a lot. I always watched his. That's cool. So you had him on the podcast?
Yeah, bro. Like he hit me right
amazing,
back
man.
up, and he went deep. For anyone who hasn't heard it, go back and listen to it. One of my greatest podcast interviews. He starts it off with a chant, okay, like to get zenned up, and he goes into his story, and his story is just incredible. But his ability to describe the waves that he's been in blew my mind. But that was the biggest takeaway, was the sensation of full body of feeling. And this podcast is a really big aesthetic program, and I'm really trying to hone in on your aesthetic preference in all sorts of ways, tactically, visually. And that's really what I'm getting at with this particular question.
Yeah. So I would definitely agree, boogie boarding and body surfing. I mean, body surfing even more so, where you're actually in the waves without a board at all, right? And you're like a seal or a dolphin. I think Mike Stewart, famous boogie boarder and body surfer, kind of explains it best, how, you're experiencing the ocean about as pure as you can, right? Because there's nothing touching the water. And then boogie boarding, for me at least, it adds that extra little bit of just an extra little bit of foam, so that you can gain speed, but you're still, you're lower in the water. So that definitely, I'm trying to get what I'm trying to explain here, but you're lower in the water, so you're more. It feels like a more intimate experience with the waves, essentially. And then with surfing, you just have a little bit of extra speed, even more so than, I guess. Can you kind of ask the question
Yeah, bro. Well,
I'm trying to get a feel on.
Yeah, totally. Let's downshift a bit, because you are in ocean rescue, and I know swimming is part of your background too. So let's take the wave out of the equation, and let's go straight to you creating the energy to move through the water, and that sensation. Because a lot of surfers, they don't swim, they don't understand that thing that the swimmers get, and a lot of swimmers don't get the thing that the surfers get. And I guess let's start with first principles of the swimming, and how that water sensation works with flow and positioning, almost like an airplane flies through the sky.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I would say that swimming is just a very freeing feeling. I don't know. The only real, I've never really done a ton of swimming in the pool. It's more so just been in the ocean, like open ocean swims or body surfing and stuff like that. But I would definitely say, I mean, as a swimmer, and a body surfer, you have a lot more drag, right? Because your body's in the water, so you're going quite a bit slower in the water, but you're also feeling those water molecules with your body a lot more. And then you get onto, a paddleboard, and you've got, just obviously you have a piece of foam underneath you, so you're able to go a little bit faster. Um, as far as getting into flow, though, yeah, I definitely think, um, like people get the runner's high. I think there's definitely a swimmer's high as well out in the water. And for me, I guess the main experience for me has just been, especially out in the ocean, when there's sharks, and there's obviously a lot of big fish, and especially around here in Santa Cruz, it's just it's a very freeing feeling to be swimming. It's a little creepy, but it's also, there's been days where I've just gone out on swims, specifically just to like, you just feel very small, like in this big fish tank, right? And you feel almost naked, so to speak. So I guess that would be kind of the sensation really from swimming, is like this. It's like you have no protection between you and whatever's underneath you, and that's, I don't know. I don't know if it's exactly like an adrenaline rush, but it kind of is in a sense. If you go out far enough, you're kind of just in each swim, you're like, well, maybe this will be the last one. Maybe, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's a very freeing feeling, being, and then, I guess once you add the paddleboard, the nice thing is that you're still, you have a little more protection, so you feel a little more comfortable in the water, and you can also travel a little longer distance, right? So I think that's why paddleboarding's so exciting. It's because instead of, there's people that can swim 20 miles, but that's going to take you far longer than if you're on a paddleboard, or if you're on an outrigger canoe, or if you're on a surf ski. You start to, you get these different crafts, and you're able to go faster and gain more ground. But yeah, they definitely all have their own sensations. I think swimming, the nice thing is just being fully immersed into the water and actually feeling like one of those, sea creatures in a sense, right? Like you feel a part of the water, as opposed to being on top of the board and you're a part of the water, but you're still on your own separate craft. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. When was it that you really got into your life saving, as
Um,
far as the organization goes?
yeah, yeah. So I kind of I grew up doing it. My sister was in junior lifeguards, so I was around down here in Capitola. We have a big program, 1,000 kids every summer. So I was watching it when I was 3 and 4 years old, and then you can start here when you're 6. So I started doing junior lifeguards, and right from the beginning, Capitola was really well known for their competition side of the sport. So beach flags for people that are familiar. Um, you know, we didn't have a ton of runs from runs. It wasn't quite as big as it is in Australia. Like there wasn't many people doing the Ironman and stuff like that. But I was really into like beach flags. I was always kind of a land animal in the beginning, at least. And then so I did that program all the way until I was 16. Until I was 17. That's captain's corps. And then I took maybe 5 or 6 years off. I went and I didn't get straight into lifeguarding. A lot of kids will get right at 16 or 17, they'll get into actually like working on the beach or being a junior lifeguard instructor, depending on which agency you work for here in Santa Cruz. But I took 5, 6 years off. I went and worked in concrete and construction, and then I started teaching surf lessons. And then my friend Tyler offered me a job down in Capitola when I was probably 24, 25 years old. So yeah, 7 years after. And that's kind of what started the whole lifeguarding experience. I did 3 summers as a seasonal just junior lifeguard instructor. And after that, I transferred over to state parks. And so there's 3 agencies in Santa Cruz. There's Capitola Beach, then there's state parks, and state parks kind of governs all of the state beaches in Santa Cruz. So it pretty much covers the biggest range of beaches, and then Santa Cruz City, which covers like the Boardwalk Beach and that area. So I got in with state parks, and so this will be my 3rd year as a seasonal working for them.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
you did the competitions pretty consistently until 17. You took a break, and are you back on the competitions?
I'm trying to. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the goal is definitely to, I mean, there's quite a few. There's probably 6, 7. I don't know. There's quite a few competitions here in California. I'm just starting to realize. I know there's regionals, nationals. Those are the two, really big ones. Regionals being, the California coast, and then nationals being all of America, and that's usually held on the East Coast, although it was held in Southern California a few years ago. And then there's a couple kind of underground competitions, the South Bay Dozen that LA County lifeguards put on, um, and then a few others. I think San Clemente Ocean Fest, and I'm starting to realize there's a ton of these different competitions all over the place. The problem's always been, especially working with state parks. As I said, this is my second year. Well, I last year with the Achilles injury, I was out, and the year before I had some issues, so I didn't actually work a ton as a state lifeguard yet. So, the talk this year is, that I've got to kind of learn some more of that operation. So that's where it becomes tricky. Is like we're definitely in California. We're in need of lifeguards, so it's pretty. Sometimes it's hard to like take off days to go and just go and compete. To justify that. So, but I mean, that's the goal. I would love to get down and do some more competitions.
Yeah,
And
so like in Australia, it's a pro sport that you got the Nutri-Grain Ironman series, and again, this is running. We're doing this simulcast for a classic, which I know has a large Australia audience. For those listening, like California sounds like it has more options for competitions. I'm here on the East Coast. I'm part of my local beach. Also, we did nationals last year. Got first, so yeah, that's pretty sick, right? And
did you guys get first?
Yeah, we got first.
Which beach are you guys at?
Wrightsville Beach.
Wrightsville. Okay, that makes sense.
Are you familiar?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
sick. Yeah, Mo Peacock.
I know the name for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like 4-time beach flags national champion.
Okay.
Went to Worlds. Yeah, he's one of our local dudes. But yeah, we've really been focusing
Awesome,
locally here on building our team up, and regionals like is a huge thing. But it's not huge in America. And my question to you on your side of the country is like, why do you think it's not as big as it is in Australia? Like, why do people not care?
Man, that is a very good question.
Because it's so cool. It's so positive. The events are exciting. Like you watch a Nutri-Grain series, they publicize it on all the channels, and it's the Ironman is a great event. It's fast. Yeah,
well, I think you could pack beaches in California, and if there was more awareness around it. I think Australia is just really good about. I mean, at one point, or now, isn't it the national sport, or it was the national sport at one point, surf lifesaving? I'm pretty sure it's like that big, and like top competitors are actually like earning livings off of it. And making money off of. Yeah. So it's like celebrated like baseball or basketball. Yeah. So I think maybe just it's just a matter of awareness around it. Definitely in Santa Cruz, it was always Ryan Buell, who runs or founder of Buell Wetsuits. He was a big surf life-saving competitor. So growing up, I'd always heard of like him, and Matt Hoffman's another one. He was my junior guard instructor. And Nick Hanna, and there's so there was for us, it was, if you were in the community if you were doing junior lifeguards, you heard about it, but other than that, it wasn't super big. So I'm not exactly sure, but I really hope that changes over time, because it is, like you said, it's an amazing sport. The beach flags, one of my favorites recently, and I haven't gotten into this, is the dory boats. So the American Ironman. And I know that's big on the East Coast, right? Especially that's kind of
really big up north. The New York, New Jersey. Like New York. Okay. I did nationals this past year, and we don't have any dory boats. And we're all watching these events, and it was like knee-high shore break. Yet these boats were just crashing. One girl went to the hospital. It's the gnarliest thing. People don't even like get how gnarly this sport is. And mad respect to the dories, because I have no desire, but like surf ski, love the surf ski, the Ironman, but like dories, woo. Is it big where you are? Because I saw a lot of people in California on at nationals like really into it. Like they truck their boats across and like 18 wheelers. Do you see it?
Yes. So I think it's definitely a lot up in Northern California, not so much. I think, I mean, usually the farthest, from my experience though, the farther south you go, the more, especially LA County,
Yeah, LA
that's
County.
kind of where it's really big. They have a lot of dory boats, and then
Yeah.
some of the state park beaches down south have the boats. I don't know if that's exactly. It might be, honestly, one of the reasons might be it's just so cold up in Northern California. So the farther up, up here you go, especially Santa Cruz is like Santa Cruz and then Half Moon Bay are some of the last lifeguard agencies, and then north of that you start getting into like Cal Fire, who's actually running water operations. There's Mendocino County state parks, but I think it's just so cold up there that a lot of them aren't really focusing on surf life saving sport. Unfortunately, because there's probably there's probably some good athletes up there that would kill it down here.
Yeah,
Kill it down south, but
like, do you notice a cultural difference between the lifeguarding core and the surfing core? Is it, or are they merged where you are?
so they, as far as I'm concerned, they used to be very well merged. Like I said, Ryan Buell with Buell wetsuits, he, him and like I said, another guy, Matt Hoffman. Um, there's a few other people I'm kind of blanking on right now, but it used to be, from my understanding, the surf lifesaving up in Santa Cruz at least was a way for surfers to stay in shape during the summer, which is what I've always used it for. The waves get kind of small. There's south swell, so we do get waves up here in Northern California in the summer, like often, but there's also long periods where it's just flat. So it's either you stay out of the water and you get out of shape, or surf lifesaving is the perfect sport. It's a lot of running, a lot of beach calisthenics, swimming, paddling, so that by the time the waves come back around, you're already in shape. So for us, it's definitely been ingrained. I think we've definitely lost that over time, and it's actually really cool. There's a few organizations now starting up, a few clubs rather, so that we have basically in Santa Cruz you have the east side and the west side, and then so I believe one of the parents of the um, upcoming junior lifeguards and now lifeguards started the West Side Surf Lifesaving Club, and then one of the other dads started the East Side Surf Lifesaving Club. So there's kind of there's a resurgence, I should say, of surf lifesaving sport coming up in the next generations, and I really hope that kind of sticks around and people start to gain awareness around it. But yeah, definitely growing up, it was really intertwined. I think now it's a lot different. Most of the surfers don't do surf lifesaving, and vice versa. So
That's too what I've noticed. Yeah, here on the East Coast. And speak to the positivity of it all, because it is such a positive thing.
Yeah, the positivity of it. I mean, one, it's I don't know. I've gained a lot out of being a lifeguard, even in the short amount of time I've been doing it. It's such a positive thing. When I was down at the state parks tryouts, it's an 80-hour academy down in Southern California, and one of the the OGs of the organization came in and talked about how lifeguarding is such a beautiful thing, because it's like all the people were great swimmers and great paddlers and great this and great that, and that's all great, but as soon as you decide that you want to be in service of other people and use your talents to help other people, that's when it becomes truly beautiful, right? And so I've surf life saving is essentially just in my opinion, is a celebration of that, and a celebration of athleticism within a sport of like being able to help people. So it's essentially these paddleboard races. It's like, how fast can you get out to a victim and rescue them? Like beach flags, even it's on land, but it's how fast can you turn around, assess the situation, and go and attack that situation. And it's kind of, I mean, it's a very unique sport in that way. I can't think of any other sport that's like that, you know, in life, really. Um, and yeah, it's just a really positive thing. And, you know, everyone, it's a very friendly community. Every time I go down to nationals or regionals, it's always just, you know, it's all love. Everyone's really stoked to see you. And it's I would say it's a lot different than surfing, because a lot of times you go to surf somewhere and people aren't very happy to see you. So
It is such a contrast there. You know, one's very group oriented, one's very egocentric oriented. And
yeah.
maybe that's the great divide. But you are a big wave surfer, and the footage I've seen you in is you got great history of big waves under your belt in a short period of time. While we're on the subject of safety in big water, how is it out there for you when you're running safety?
So that's something that I've kind of just gotten into in recent times, to be honest. Before, it was kind of just paddle out and go surf. And I think, I mean, I definitely always had a safety mentality. As I said, you know, I've been, you know, around lifeguarding pretty much my whole life. You know, I wasn't a lifeguard my whole life, but doing junior lifeguards and just being around that mentality. So I've always had, I guess, a safety mindset around it, just around like really assessing things. I would say I'm a very calculated person. I've never like put myself into situations where it felt like too over the top. Obviously, in big waves, you know, there's Mother Nature is in charge, but there's a lot of different ways that you can mitigate the risk, you know, just from like understanding lineups, how far the waves are going to break out, you know, where your hazards are, this and that. So I've always, you know, been very safety oriented. And then it wasn't until I started going over to Nazare. So I've been over there the past 7 years. I didn't go this year because of my injury, but you know, the last 6 years I've been going over there to paddle surf. And obviously it's a big tow-in spot, but there's a, you know, if you don't have the equipment, obviously towing, and once you get into jet skis and all that, it gets a lot more expensive. So it's a lot easier to just paddle off the beach, and you can actually paddle from the south side of Nazare around the lighthouse to the front side. And you're not going to surf it on the biggest of big days, but there's plenty of days in the, you know, like 15 to 20 foot, you know, 30-foot range that you can go out there and you can paddle. So, but from that experience, you know, Nazare is a big beach break. So I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going all over the place right now. But Nazare is a big beach break, so it's very shifty. Whereas Mavericks is pretty user friendly for not having your own jet ski or like your own partner to help with safety, because there's a big channel. So even if you get blasted, you might go through the rocks, but most of the time you can get to the channel. Nazare, you know, you can ride a wave perfectly, kick out, and then the next one's going to land on your head because that beach break is shifting around and moving. So that's what started to get me interested in jet skis. And last year, my friends and I got a jet ski, and so we started running water safety for each other over there. They'd had some experience driving, and they kind of taught me a few things. And then this year, I took the state parks jet ski operator course, or you know, rescue watercraft operator course, which is how it's preferred language in lifeguarding. You know, surfing, jet ski. I think rescue watercraft is kind of the best way to talk about those. But so I took that course, and so now I've been kind of trading off with my friend a little bit, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It definitely adds a huge element of safety. But I would also argue too, you know, with all of this, you know, everyone talks about, oh, you have to have a jet ski, you have to have a jet ski. A lot of times, to be honest, I feel a lot safer without a jet ski, because especially if you don't, you know, it's me being someone who's kind of an amateur, like if you're not really good, and even if you are really good on a jet ski, it adds a different level of danger, because you know, now you have a big piece of metal in the water that can flop around and smack you. And you know, I've been out plenty of times out at Nazare and Mavericks, and and not had issues, when I'm just with my board. That being said, it can get you out of some dangerous situations. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, excuse me. While we're on the issue of the jet skis, is there, you take the course. I assume you were driving before the course. Did the course really take you to another level of operator?
Yeah, I would say so. So my experience in Nazaré, which is like one of the gnarliest places to drive a jet ski, right, was sort of my friends being like, okay, this is how a jet ski works. Couple pickups in the harbor, and now I'm running safety in like 20-foot Hawaiian surf out there with them paddling. And we pulled it off. It wasn't, it's I think the nice thing about a rescue watercraft is that once you have a good understanding of surfing, it becomes a lot easier to operate one as long as you're not making stupid decisions. But the whole idea of like finding the rips, finding the channels, moving your way back out, it's very simple. And now you have a throttle where you can go, okay, I want to go to that rip over there. And a lot of Nazaré is just like this, because they're these big triangles. It's kind of just navigating through different peaks, and it's actually, depending on the day, it's very doable. So that was my experience from learning how to drive a jet ski. Hey Jack, yeah, why don't you run safety for us at the gnarliest wave ever? And so we pulled it off. I wouldn't say it was the best thing to do, but we did it. And then when I went to the state parks operator course, it was a matter of in the harbor for the first 4 hours, just literally learning how to like turn the sled at like get the sled parallel to the dock, and then doing that a million times, then doing that with a deckhand on the back, and then doing it with two other people on the back. So it was a much different experience. And now I feel, obviously I don't, like I said, I think jet skis is like it's definitely a lifelong pursuit to actually get really good with a rescue watercraft. I'm not saying that I don't think jet skis are great. I was kind of referring to the fact that since I was an amateur, it feels safer without a jet ski for me. But yeah, no, they're an amazing tool. And yeah, I felt like I got a really good understanding of how they work. And now it's just a matter of putting the time in at different spots and getting the timing, and talking with the local rescue teams, so that you're also not getting in the way. I think that's a big part too, is just because you have a jet ski, that's great, but if you go in and try to rescue somebody and someone else does too, and you jam up that area, it adds a lot more hazards. It's a great tool, but it also can get a lot more dangerous once you're dealing with all the different moving parts.
Can you, a lot of people aspire to surf big waves, but we all know you need to put in the time, but you also have to break the seal at some point. How did you break that seal paddling out to Mavericks the first time? And can you set us up with a little story of how that was and how it was that you decided to head out there?
Yeah, so for me, it was like I said, ever since I was a little kid, it was always this really slow process, because I was pretty terrified of the water, all the way until I was like, in my mid-teens. And then, right around 16, 17, when I was starting to stand up surf and I was doing all that downhill skateboarding, I saw this documentary. It was just called Mavericks, a documentary, and it was by Grant Washburn, who's like a super legendary, one of the pioneers up at Mavericks. And I pretty much watched that movie over and over every single night. And that was kind of the beginning of my passion for surfing big waves. I was riding big hills at night on a skateboard, and I started to equate that to what that would be like to ride a big wave. So I imagine, like, instead of just riding this big this big hill, what would it be like if this big hill had a big mountain of water coming down behind it? And it was just this, I guess for me, a lot of it really came from visualization, right? Like just like seeing myself in my head riding these giant waves, even though I wasn't anywhere near the ocean. I was on land. Just kind of a strange concept, but I think I spent so much time in my head visualizing this that from there it was just like this. It started to speed up, and I surfed, Steamer Lane. There's a wave Middle Peak out there at Steamer Lane. That's one of the iconic big waves in Santa Cruz, and then from there there's a few waves up the coast, and eventually it was my friends Tyler and Tyler Conroy and Pat Shaughnessy were getting into, they'd already been up surfing at Mavericks, and Tyler offered me one day to come up on a day where it was real low tide. So the nice thing about really low tide at Mavericks is you don't need much swell. So it was just barely breaking. And I went up and I was with had like a 7.8, which is a very small board, just to go out and check it out. It was the perfect. And so we went out with his friend. I actually ran into his friend yesterday in the parking lot, which was kind of full circle, like the first guy I'd ever paddled out with. This guy Lawton, I think he said his name was, but we went out and he kind of gave us the rundown. We did like a little prayer in the estuary there, just prayer for safety and stuff. And it was this really cool experience of like first time initiation into Mavericks. It wasn't like, oh, let's go out there and just charge a giant wave. It was like, no, this is like a pretty sacred, special place. Like, let's treat it with respect. And we paddled out, and I just sat on the bowl, which is kind of where the wave, rears up and breaks, like the main breaking point of that wave. And I remember just sitting there and seeing this, this big lump. And the way Mavericks comes in, it's, it comes out of really deep water, so there'll be nothing, and all of a sudden it's just this giant slab throwing barrel. And even at that size, 10-foot faces, it was just like horrifying. So I ended up just sitting, and I don't think I even caught a wave that day, and just paddled it in. And it was maybe like 2 to 3 years after that I actually started like going out there and giving it a shot. So I think I definitely think it humbled me at the age of, I was probably 22 at that time. So it wasn't until I was like 25 that I actually paddled back out there to like give it a shot. So
how old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And you've
32.
covered a lot of ground.
Was that?
So you've covered a lot of ground.
Well, I've dedicated a lot of time, from that point, I think I got really passionate about surfing out there. And I started dating a girl who was a journalist over in Hawaii. And we, I'd go over and spend time in Hawaii and started surfing Waimea Bay. And then, I went down to Puerto Escondido and spent some time there. So it was definitely like this general, this like I said, the slow progression of, so just putting in time over and over.
You surfed Waimea before you surfed Mavericks.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Take me to that first trip to Hawaii. The first time you get off the airplane in Hawaii, for those who haven't been, is just you smell this air that's completely foreign, and it just fills you up with just stoke. So give us your stoke story. Give us your trip out to the North Shore, and give us your first take on your paddle out there.
Yeah.
And what year was it?
I definitely agree. This was, I'm not sure. Maybe that was, 2022, probably like let's say that next season. So I went out to Mavericks at 22 years old. So maybe I was 23. I don't exactly know, but I do like the way you describe the sensations of the smells of Hawaii. That's really cool, man. Because till this day, man, I've been back to Hawaii a bunch of times now, and it's just like, I love California. I love where I live, as I talked about earlier, being able to snowboard and surf in the same day. But there's this sensation of being in Hawaii, just that smell, right? It's like, whoa, I'm in Hawaii, right?
And you
it's
get to the North Shore,
paradise. It's warm.
The roosters are chirping.
Yeah, the roosters are chirping. You get to wake up in the morning to hearing. Yeah, that's amazing. At first, I kind of hated it. 3:30 in the morning, you're like, what the fuck was that? But but you get used to it, right? And all of a sudden, it's just you're in paradise. But yeah, let's talk about just that first time, especially on the North Shore of Oahu, coming down that iconic vista of where you're on top of the hill and you're looking down and you just see the North Shore. And I remember thinking, oh my God, look at that. That's one of the most iconic, probably the most iconic pieces of coast in the world, right? Like the most movies shot there, it's kind of the epicenter of surfing. It's like the proving grounds, right? The North Shore proving grounds. So I definitely was scared, like looking at that, I'm like, oh shit. It was I think the first year I was there, maybe it may have been an El Nino winter too. So can't remember when the last El Nino was, maybe 2000. Anyways, and so yeah, it was just this, I guess this amazing feeling, coming down into, and my girlfriend Shannon at the time, she was, like I said, she was a reporter, so she worked for WSL. She worked for all these different news outlets. The Inertia, there was this online, I think they're still around, the Inertia on Instagram. But so we were staying right kind of in the center there at her friend's house, right at Rocky Point, and so it was just this, I'm super grateful to have had that experience, and just staying right in the epicenter, like getting to surf Rocky Point, getting to surf Sunset Beach. I think the nice thing about the North Shore is there's so much variety. So it's not like you don't have to go straight to Waimea Bay. I mean, just being in the ocean on the North Shore of Oahu is an experience in and of itself. You start off surfing Sunset Beach, and I surfed Sunset, maybe what they would call 4-foot Hawaiian, 8-foot faces. And I remember getting probably to this day the most work I've ever been in the ocean was a 4-foot Hawaiian Sunset, which sounds funny, because people are like, but you've ridden like giant waves at Mavericks, and you haven't. It's amazing that sometimes like anyone who spends time in the ocean can understand that it's not necessarily the biggest wave that like sends you the biggest, deals you the biggest beating, right? I remember paddling out to Sunset, and I'm on my shortboard in my board shorts. Yeah, this is great. And the set comes through, and I try to duck dive it, and the thing just absolutely obliterates me and just smashes my face into the board, just pinned on the bottom. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be some trip,
You're like, I need a bigger board.
I need a bigger board, because it doesn't. That's the interesting thing about over there is just it's coming out of being on islands, coming out of open ocean. It's a whole different experience than California, where swells are. I mean, and there's obviously open ocean waves in California, but Hawaii just feels like a different animal. So,
so did you get a bigger board? Because you say you went to Waimea. That's a big step up. Like Sunset,
I did get a bigger board.
I've heard many times some of the best big wave surfers in the world, they say Sunset's the best wave in the world. And other big wave surfers have claimed, like there's a guy in New York City, Will Scuden. I remember seeing him in 2006 before he really went big. He's like studying. He's like, this is the university of how to ride big waves, is Sunset Point. And the guys who ride the most waves at Sunset have the biggest boards. So you get a bigger board, and what happens next?
So you get a bigger board, and then you hope you can ride that board. So at the time, I think I got a what was it, a Weber, maybe? I don't know. I got an 8.6. So I was over there. I think the biggest board I had at that time was like a 6.5 or something like that. So I mean, obviously I knew if I was going to surf Waimea, I needed a bigger board. So I ended up getting like an 8.6, I think. And yeah, I went over to, I don't think I ended up surfing Sunset Beach on that particular board, but I ended up going over to Waimea just on a smaller day. So there's the outside wave at Waimea, and then there's the inside wave, which is called Pinballs, which is kind of just breaks on the inside right next to the rocks there in the bay. And I think I just went out there and rode some waves, and that was my first experience with surfing Waimea Bay. And then from there, like I said, it was an El Nino year, so it was just like swell after swell, and it was actually like a really nice progression. I think I spent 2 months over there that year, so I was able to just each day go out a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, and that all kind of ended up with getting to watch the Eddie Aikau that year from the point out there. As I said, my my girlfriend at the time was a reporter, so she was filming from like the house at the end of the cliff. So I got to watch all the best big wave riders, surfing, 30-foot, 60-foot Hawaiian or 60-foot faces out at Waimea Bay. And from there, that kind of just, I think that was what really started to, pique my interest in surfing big waves. It was obviously so terrifying, but I was on land just getting to watch it going, wow, look at that. That's incredible, So, yeah, that was cool.
So you paddle out at the end of that comp in that trip?
So I didn't end up surfing that day because I think it was just at that point it was, I mean, that was big, you know, that was like 60-foot waves closing out the whole bay. And I had an 8.6, which is, you know, it's a good sized board, but it's not really what you want for the so I ended up waiting till the next morning, but the next morning there was still some like really big, really tall waves. And I went out first light in the morning. And I think that's when I got my first real big wipeout in big waves. You know, I went for, you know, a wave that I thought was good, and the whole bottom just dropped out and poked the nose, flew over the top, got blasted all the way to the beach, and kind of the rest is history. I was hooked on big wave surfing. I was like, I survived. I survived. I love this sport.
That's such a great turning point, because some people might at that moment be like, all right, enough of this. I'm headed back to Rocky Point to shred some my 6'5" or 2, whatever you got. But you were like, no, I want more of this juice. So
the juice.
You go then to Porto. How was Porto Escondido for you?
Yeah, you know, the unique thing about all these different ways is they all have their own faces, right? So Puerto was always really scary because, you know, I'd seen in a lot of the old movies, you know, a lot of people drown there, and a lot of people have broken their necks there because it's a shallow sandbar. So the unique thing about Puerto is it's a shallow sandbar, so a lot like Pipeline, where you can hit the bottom. Luckily, it's not, you know, jagged reef, but you can hit the bottom very easily. And, you know, there's a lot of neck, spinal injuries that happen there. But also you know, since it's a beach break, there's a lot of rip currents. So just, you know, getting pulled back out to sea and getting stuck in one spot. So that was, you know, I think that's the interesting thing about big waves, right? Is it's not like this wave's heavier than this wave's heavier than this wave. You know, I think they all kind of on their own day have their own set of like inherent risks and rewards. And, you know, to say that, you know, Mavericks is heavier than Puerto, which is heavier than whatever, I think that's kind of false. You know, each spot is just a different beast, you know. So Puerto is just scary in that regard, you know, the shallow bottom, and then also the rip current. So, you know, at a spot like Mavericks, a lot of times, since it's a point break, it'll, you know, once you get blasted by the wave, it'll kind of either push you in and you can go through the rocks, which is really gnarly. But a lot of times, like I said, you'll get kind of pushed to the channel. Whereas Puerto, you'll fall on a wave and you'll get recycled. So essentially, like, the wave pushes you down and then sucks you back out, and then pushes you down and sucks you back out. And so you can end up taking like 10, 15, 20 waves on the head over and over and over until you make it back out, or you try to get back to the beach. So yeah, Puerto was a scary one, but I didn't surf it, you know, much over like 10-foot faces. So that was a really good experience as well, to just go down there and start to kind of feel that water out a little bit. Yeah.
How do you like that? Because it is almost like a pipeline barrel. It just pitches and barrels. From your standpoint, do you enjoy that more than, say, you know, a Mavericks or?
Yeah, I think like I said, I think it's different. I definitely I prefer like a barreling wave. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of us surfers, and I think the ultimate is to get barreled, right? So any wave that has like a nice hollow section is kind of the holy grail in surfing. But that being said, you know, it's also fun to go straight sometimes on a big wave and just get have that sensation. So yeah, I definitely I wouldn't say I have a preference really, as far as, I think they're all just unique and fun in their own right, you know. But definitely Puerto, the goal there is to just go and get barreled. So that's the fun part about there.
How's the culture there, the beach culture, in contrast to all these other spots you've been? I've heard it's pretty chill. What is it like on land when you're in Porto Escondido?
Yeah, my experience was, yeah, very chill. Everyone's super friendly. Um, um, I mean, I wouldn't say all the time, but I've kind of found that like these places with like heavy waves usually have the chillest vibes. That kind of sounds weird, and I'm sure that's not completely true, but a lot of places like Nazare and Mavericks and Puerto, where there's this really heavy energy. It seems like everyone's pretty, especially if the waves have been really good and there's been like a really big session, everyone's just really happy and like almost like stoked to be alive, instead of just fighting over the little beach break and being like, no, forget you, fuck you, this and that. It's more of like there's a lot more community around it, right? Because everyone's kind of looking out for each other and people are kind of worried about your well-being and stuff. But Puerto is definitely a really rich culture of surfing, and especially like heavy barrel charging individuals, and this big town there, and it's definitely like blown up over the years. I think when my friends were going there, 15 years ago, it was a lot mellower than it is now. Now I think there's a lot of hotels going up, and there's definitely like a big, live party scene and just a lot of tourists, and but I would say, yeah, it's a great place, an amazing place, and definitely a rich surfing culture there.
Where do you want to go that you haven't been?
Where do I want to go? Man, everywhere. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'd like to go to Australia, and I'd like to go to Indonesia. Those are two places I'd like to go. I think Australia probably first and foremost. Problem is, like I said, at least for now, that's kind of June, July, August, between running my business and through lifeguarding, is pretty busy time of year, and that's kind of when I think that's kind of their peak season. So, but I'd definitely like to go over to Australia and do some slab surfing over there.
What spots in particular are you looking at?
Whew, I think just a lot of them, man. Definitely like some of the big waves. I'd love to go over to ship sterns and try to surf that wave. Although that would be I'd be on my backhand. I'm a goofy footer, so yeah, I don't know. I think it just, that whole area just has a ton of big waves, and and plus just I mean, it's kind of one of the epicenters of surfing, and kind of where there's a huge surfing culture over there. So I imagine it's just an amazing place to see. I don't think you can really go wrong with any of those spots over there. But definitely ship sterns has been a big one on my radar. Ship sterns, and then there's a couple other slabs that I've been looking at. That wave hours looks really amazing. Scary, super scary, shallow. Again, different than deep water spots like Mavericks. You're more worried about hitting the bottom and backwash and stuff, but at least to go check them out. Who knows if I'll end up surfing them, but definitely to go over and just see those waves would be amazing.
So here I want to do some slab versus the Nazare kind. So previous episode 38, we have Matt Dunsmore, and I got him on the podcast because he had just scored ship sterns last week. Okay, so I don't know if you saw that footage, but they got 6 ship sterns in summertime, which was apparently really rare. He kills it. He killed it. And I was getting down to it, and he's like, man, I only really like the slab. And I was like, well, you're surfing a big wave. It's super thick. It's breaking near the beach. And then I'm analyzing, and I know I'm talking to you a couple of days later. Is Mavericks considered a slab in your mind, or is it a big wave? Because it kind of seems like it's like both. And then he contrasted the slab at ship sterns with, say, the Nazare wave, which he hadn't been to. He said he wants to check that off his list, but like you got Nazare, you understand Nazare multiple times. I guess what I'm getting at here is like sensation and consequence. And as a big wave surfer, like tell us a little bit about those things.
Kind of the difference between slabs and big wave. And
yeah.
So first I would say Mavericks is kind of a hybrid. It's a slab in the sense that it comes into one spot and breaks, but you're not typically hitting the bottom. Although there have been some body surfers that have surfed the left that have actually, I think a body surfer broke his leg out there. So it does get really shallow, especially low tide on the left. So I would say Mavericks is a slab, more of like a deep, what you call like a deep water slab. So, on the bowl on on a big day, you're probably talking 15, 20 feet of water, as opposed to some of these other slabs where it might be 2 feet of water, 3 feet of water underneath. Um, I mean, I'll just come out and say that I think slabs for me are a lot scarier. I'd rather get pushed deep, and I know some people are different. Some people prefer the the shallow water. Uh, I just personally, I would rather get pushed deep underwater and get held down for a long time than hit the bottom. I went over to Tahiti a few years ago, which is a really crazy slab. And every time you fall on that wave, you're just thinking, "Oh my God, I'm gonna get cheese grated on the bottom." And to me, that's a lot scarier. It's also a different kind of experience, riding slabs as opposed to riding, just somewhere like Nazare, where you're not really worried about hitting the bottom. You're more so just worried about drowning. So and a lot of these slabs too. I mean, like even somewhere like Tahiti or Shipsterns, I mean, you can get held down a long time too. So it's I don't know, but it's also just the risk to reward part. I would say slabs oftentimes have a bigger reward. Not to say anything against Nazare. I think Nazare is amazing, and there are certain places where you can get people have gotten big barrels out at Nazare, but like somewhere like Tahiti or somewhere like Shipsterns, you're dealing with a much bigger barrel. So for me, the risk to reward, the reward's a lot higher. Being able to get like one of those crazy visions in a barrel, you know. Like I said, Nazare, you can get barreled out there, but it's a lot more tricky as opposed to Chopu, where it's just like a perfect tube every single time, and that's what you're going for, is that crazy barrel.
Yeah. Can you give us the story of the best session that just pops to your mind that you've ever had, where you're like on your deathbed and you're like, oh, I want to remember that moment, that day, and then tell us when it was, where it was, who was with you?
Yeah. Um. Oof. Let me think about that one for a second.
Yeah, meditate.
Yeah. Best best session, man. There's been some good ones. Um. Very fortunately, but I would definitely say probably this last year. What was this last year? Yeah, so it was during the Eddie Aikau swell. I was over in Hawaii, and I went out to surf an outer reef with a friend, Evan, and just kind of the stars aligned. His tow partner at the time had gone over to a different island, um, and so I was staying at his house, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to partner up?" And like, it'll be me, my other friend, and so we'll have two skis and three people. So and then also, so four people, two skis, four people. And so it just worked out really good because these outer reefs, I mean, I think one or two people maybe made it to the outside. I mean, it was like as big as Hawaii gets. The Eddie Aikau was running, so Waimea Bay was closing out, and paddling off the beach would have just been a nightmare. So stars aligned. I paddled out there, and surfing this outer reef first thing in the morning. There's three people out. And it's just like dream session. The swell of the huge swells coming through. It's clean winds, which isn't super common for out there. And I'm paddling for this wave, and I just get stuck in the lip and fly head first over the falls to the bottom, just get absolutely annihilated. So, not the best way to start off the morning, just flying head first through the air, held down, two wave hold down, almost drowned, and then like come up. My friend, or this guy, comes and picks me up. I end up running safety like the rest of the morning for everybody, and I ended up not surfing that spot again. I think we went in and got some lunch, and then we go over to outside log cabins, which is like like one of the iconic waves in Biggest Wednesday, where Ken Bradshaw and a bunch of a bunch of the other guys in the
Derek Donor.
Whenever that was, yeah, Derek Dorner, yeah, exactly. In what was that, 1998? Maybe that was.
Yeah, Dave Kalama,
El Nino year, Dave Kalama, all those guys. So I go out there, and Ken Bradshaw's actually out there on a jet ski, and he's just riding the waves. He's not even, he's not towing, but he's driving his jet ski in front of these like 60, 70-foot waves. And it was just this really cool experience to like actually see that wave awaken. I mean, I'm not sure how many times in my lifetime I'll actually get to see that. I mean, it's a wave that doesn't break unless it's like everywhere is as big as it possibly gets. And I remember just getting to see my buddy Evan, tow into just some monster waves out there. Like, I mean, I don't even know how big, but just like probably the biggest surf I've ever seen to this day. And I was just sitting in, there's a giant channel there, so I'm just sitting on my paddleboard, just sitting there watching him tow into these enormous waves. And yeah, I ended up like paddling over to the peak. I didn't end up catching a wave, but just like feeling the energy, just being out there, like sitting on the shoulder, watching these just giant waves come through. And then we ended up on the way back. We stopped off at the wave that I originally gotten smashed on. It's this, and there's nobody out anymore. The wind's kind of up, and the only wave I'd gotten all day, I'd just gone over the falls and just gotten absolutely annihilated. And so I was back for redemption, right? I was like, I got one wave in 12-hour session or whatever. So I'm sitting there waiting. My friend Evan's running safety for me, and this perfect wave comes. I paddle, get to my feet, ride this wave, and just stand in like the biggest barrel I've ever stood in my life. Probably like, I mean, I don't know what I would say, 20-foot Hawaiian like wave, big left barrel, standing tall in this thing. Didn't come out of it. Board breaks in half, disappears. Go to the beach. That was a wrap. But that was, I mean, to this day, those days are pretty hard to come by. Just with like that clean and that big all day. I mean, there's been some other sessions, but that was a pretty special one. And then to, just not ended on the fact that I got absolutely annihilated. To get redemption. And it was this really cool thing because there's no footage, no documentation of it. Just me, my friend Evan, and a couple of the lifeguards were out there, and it was just like, yeah, it's a cool. I think with everything being documented these days and like constantly just like footage of it's kind of special to just have a session where there's no documentation. It's almost like it didn't happen. People are just taking my word for it that it happened. I got a good wave. I got redemption, and that was that.
Well, you painted a beautiful picture there. Can
Thanks,
I get
yeah.
Can I get one more comment there on the drop, and then when it did eat you up, what was going on?
So yeah, I think the tide had kind of gotten low at this particular spot. I keep saying this particular spot because it's kind of a secret outer reef wave. Not sure if I talk about it, but the tide had started to get a little bit lower, so it just felt like it got a lot hollower out there, and like, yeah, I remember my only experience from surfing out there was literally that one wave. I don't think I'd even ever surfed this particular spot in my life, to be honest. so to go out there on like the day of days and then paddle for a wave and then just go flying headfirst over the falls and just get absolutely humbled. It was definitely like okay, I don't know about this one. So when we came back from the tow session over at Log Cabins, I was definitely nervous, and especially there was nobody out in the water anymore at that point. It was literally just me, and then a couple of the North Shore lifeguards, which was nice. They were like watching over me, and then my friend Evan. But it's a different experience, at least for me. Like when you're surfing big waves with a big crowd of 20 people, the level of confidence is a lot higher because you're doing it with people, right? But when you're by yourself, you start to get into your head a lot more. So I'm kind of just paddling around. Oh, that wave looks good. I don't know. So I was in my head for 30, 45 minutes. And finally this one came, and I just was like, all right, you got to just give it another shot. So I'm paddling into this wave, and all I remember, it was almost like the you get these flashbacks of just like, as I'm paddling into the wave, in my head, I'm thinking flying head first over the falls again. It's very hard to like get yourself back into the mental space of like making the wave when something bad happened like that. So I'm just thinking in my head, I just need to get down the face of this wave. And I remember it went from the first wave being the most like horrific, just stuck in the lip, to just flying head first, to like being connected to the wave, like the easiest drop you could ever. It was like the polar opposite, the easiest drop you could ever imagine, riding to the bottom, make a nice bottom turn off my toes, and then you just see the whole thing like lining up down the line, and I just got to like stand in this giant barrel, and it was just like this perfect, perfect tube. I don't know if I would have been able to make it out of it, but just being able to stand in this big blue barrel, and like, yeah, I don't know, it was a really cool experience. But it was nice to have the difference between, like, because that wipeout could have easily just kind of ruined it for me. All it takes is like one bad experience, and if you don't come back from that, you don't like get back on the horse, so to speak, like it can fuck with you for a while. So it was just perfect to have. It was almost like this, with Mother Nature. If you want to talk it in like spiritual terms, it's like, it was like, okay, you need to respect me. I'm going to give you one gnarly beating, but then you come back and you're persistent. I'm going to give you a reward for that persistence. That kind of makes sense. And I think that's, to me, like one of the most beautiful things about big waves is like, it can, it can ruin you. I mean, the ocean can take your life, but I think if you come at it with a place of humility and respect, and just like, I really want this, like, I want to get a good wave. It's not about trying to get the fame or the glory. It's like, and maybe that first wave, that was kind of the lesson to be learned. It's like, you don't just go out to a spot and just think you're going to turn around and catch the biggest wave ever without like, paying some sort of dues. So it was just beautiful. It was like, okay, you got humbled. Okay, don't do that again. And now here's a beautiful wave, something to remember. And then I'm going to eat your board, and it's never going to appear again, because that's your price out here. I'm taking your board with me. So I don't know. You want to talk in I don't know. Yeah, that's just my take on it.
Bro, you killed that. Hey, so like thanks, what's bro. The confidence that then puts in your heart that you can then take with you on land in all this regard of these big wave situations you're in? Because I can imagine that the confidence lives deep.
Yeah, no, I think it's just that, like what I just talked about. It's like this idea of, like you can do anything you put your mind to. That's the big one I've realized. Like when I was, just starting out as a surfer, I really didn't think I'd be able to ride big waves. It was like, okay, I'm just starting out at 17, standing up. Like it's going to be very hard to like get into riding these big waves. And so it's given me this confidence that like you can do anything you put your mind to, but it's going to be a process, right? Like, I had in my mind, for example, with this outer reefs wave, I had in my mind, like, I'm just going to catch the biggest wave, gnarliest wave ever, and just do it. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to put in some work, and you're going to have to, start to understand the wave a little bit better. But if you're willing to not give up, then, you can achieve anything in life, really. So I think, and then you can, in the sense of coming back to land, you can take that into business. You can take that into, whatever things you want to do. I mean, it's just about, I guess, persistence. That's the biggest thing I've learned with big wave surfing, because and just surfing in the ocean in general. The ocean's always in charge. And so if you're not persistent, then you're never going to get the reward, right? Because it's going to humble you left and right. But if you just keep pushing and keep, doing your homework, and, sometimes these things don't happen overnight. It's not like you just, like you want to be a big wave surfer and all of a sudden you catch really good waves. takes a lot of work, and dedication and time. And I think that's just life in general, right? You want to, and it always works out. It's like, the only time, like the saying goes, the only way you fail is if you give up, so.
Killer, bro. And like, so on land, you have you're a journalist, you do podcasting. I've read your articles in Inertia, and you have a
Nice.
business, Flow. Like, tell us. I guess let's start with how you got into the journalism, and then we can move on to these other pursuits.
Yeah, so the journalism thing I haven't done in a long time. That was a job I was doing with my ex-girlfriend, who was at the time was also a journalist for the Inertia, and she kind of gave me the job of running that. So I wrote a few articles in that one, and that was kind of my job while I was over in Hawaii, which super grateful for that experience to have, been able to like work while I was over in Hawaii, essentially working remote. But yeah, I've always really enjoyed telling stories. I think now it's more so just been on my Instagram platform. And then yeah, so Flow is my shirt. So this is Flow is actually an organization I work for, run by a guy, Nick Hart, good friend of mine, and it's a safe space after school program. They do all kinds of things from mountain biking, skateboarding, and then I run their surf program. So, and he's kind of who gave me my start essentially. So we started, and it's for middle and high school kids in the Santa Cruz area and beyond. They're trying to expand over time, but as far as the surf program, any kid can just come down, and we provide boards, we provide wetsuits, and essentially just free surfing lessons, surf and ocean safety lessons down here in Santa Cruz. And they're actually so Flow is my friend Nick's company, but through Flow and through teaching these surf lessons, I actually started my own company, Central Coast Waterman. So Central Coast Waterman is essentially my brand that combines the world of surf lifesaving with surf camp. So it's essentially a junior lifeguard surf camp hybrid that I started here in Santa Cruz. I was doing both. I was working as a junior lifeguard instructor, and I was teaching surf lessons. And just with everything we've been talking about on this podcast, I started to realize there's a combination between the two, right? And like I attribute a lot of my success in big waves to surf lifesaving, like just getting physically strong enough to paddleboard for that long, surf ski, swimming. That was the big training I did. So it's now a matter of teaching these kids, and going even beyond that. Central Coast Waterman, being able to teach kids stand up paddling, eventually outrigger canoe, and just learning this waterman lifestyle of just enjoying the water. It's like, it's not just about riding a shortboard, it's not just about riding big waves, it's like it's just enjoying the water on any given day. As that's the beautiful thing about the ocean. There's a million different things we can do. So but yeah, Flow basically, all my business endeavors started with Flow. So really thankful to Nick. Definitely check them out. Flowlovesyou.com is their website, and yeah, it's a great organization. So
that's super beautiful what you're doing, and it's crazy that you're bringing these two worlds together that we were just talking there at the beginning. What kind of stoke are you seeing in these kids and the progression over time? And do you see these kids turning into the next generation of chargers out there?
I hope so, for sure, man. I definitely see, I think the hardest part about the whole business for me has been getting people to kind of conceptualize this idea of being a waterman, right? Because everyone sees surfing, and all the kids that I have in my program, it's just like, they just want to ride a 5'6" shortboard, and they want to ride that board if it's this big or if it's this big, and they don't want to like expand beyond that. And like, that's totally fine. Like I'm not here to tell anybody, hey, you need to do this thing. But the whole goal is to just like, okay, try a pair of fins and go body surf. try a paddle board and go paddle out past the buoy out there. Try, like all these different things. Cause I think for me, at least, and what I've been really thinking about recently is like, depending on the day, it's like for me, like the other day I was riding a shortboard and the conditions did not warrant riding a shortboard. And so instead of just having this great experience where I could have been on a prone paddleboard, I was thinking that day, a stand-up paddleboard, I would have been having so much more fun, catching so many more waves, and also just getting a lot more experience in the water, right? If you're only riding the same craft, it's like you're kind of limited a lot of times in what you can do. It's like if the waves are completely flat, you could be like, oh, life sucks. Or you could get a fishing pole and go stand on a stand-up paddle and go fish out in the kelp beds and have a great day, right? So I hope that's what I kind of instill in these kids, is just that, like, the ocean's an amazing place, and it's an incredible, like, resource to just, like, get satisfaction out of every day. And yeah, I've definitely seen it a little bit. Usually, so right now we're in our after school program. So summer camp's been my big time of year, but right now it's after school stuff. So I work with a few families, around the around the year, and it's usually the first hour is I've kind of just designated to, like, waterman training. So we'll do anything from, like, first aid and CPR training to sprint paddleboarding or swimming. So there's kind of, I've kind of broken it up into like an hour of that training, and then I give them an hour at the end to, focus on whatever kind of surfing they want to do. So that's definitely, I think most of us can agree that surfing's one of the best parts of the ocean. Not the only part, but it is. Riding a wave is one of the peaks. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're teaching. Yeah, sorry. You're teaching eternal truths that a person like yourself who's done the time understands, and the kids don't know these truths.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think and like I said, rightfully so. I was the same way when I started boogie boarding. My dad was like, "Oh, you should try surfing," and I was like, "No," I was so set on this boogie board, set in this one way of boogie boarding. And I mean, even to this day, I mean, I'm a big fan of. Majority of the time, I like to ride a shortboard. I mean, it's just kind of how. But I think, you know, just getting out in the water and enjoying it every day is really the key. Even today, there's no waves. It's kind of stormy, but you could get out there on a paddleboard and get your workout in or whatever. So.
Dude, yeah. So, like, before we conclude here, you've just totally crushed an hour and 20 minutes. I'm inspired. I know everyone listening here in the future is just going to be, they're percolating. Before we conclude, I got two more questions for you. You're a classic podcast host. I'm dabbling with a classic. As you know, this is going to be broadcast on their channel as well. How do you view podcasting, and what's kind of your method? And tell us your kind of your eternal truths that you've learned as a podcast host.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely still super fresh to me, but Dan reached out after we did I did a podcast on a classic, and he asked if I wanted to kind of stand as the, I guess the somebody in the field of big wave surfing that was familiar with the territory and could kind of dive into some of the questions a little bit deeper as far as, like board equipment or whatever. So I thought it was a cool idea. And at the time, I'd already been kind of thinking of doing my own podcast, just because a lot of times, when I go on these trips to Nazaré or wherever, I get to meet these really cool people that have like very inspiring stories. And so it was just like this perfect opportunity, right? I didn't need to get the platform. It was just like, why don't you just come on, use our platform? You just need a pair of headphones and a laptop, and from there, I've already gotten to do like 2 or 3 with some of my friends and heroes. I just did one with my friend Antonio Silva. He's a big wave charger out of Portugal, and then Ryan Levinson, who's a friend of mine, who was like one of the original rescue watercraft drivers for the WSL. Steve Rice, another big wave charger from South Africa, who's a friend of mine, and so I don't know, it's a lot of fun to just to I don't know. I mean, as you know, podcasting's fun. It's like you get to learn about somebody else, and you get to create this piece of content that other people can listen to. I don't know. I'm really enjoying it, to be honest. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, dude.
And just coming from somebody, I love listening to podcasts myself. So it's cool to
100%.
be on the opposite end now. So
yeah. Who are some of your I guess favorite interviewers? And we can even go across podcasts. You know, maybe public radio. Maybe you know, I enjoy Charlie Rose. You know.
Oh, nice. Charlie Rose.
Yeah, you familiar?
I don't know if I know Charlie Rose. No.
Oh, bro, he's the OG.
I have to check him out.
Yeah, he started in the '90s on PBS.
Okay.
Yeah, check him out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's, you know, I started out listening to like Joe Rogan, and you know, I know it's been kind of controversial over time, but I really like. I love him. I like the fact that he plays a neutral role, right? And so you as the listener get to learn a lot, because he's just, instead of him being like, yeah, I know what you're talking, you know, it's like he plays it like he's super dumb, and so then you're able to conceptualize something from like a physicist or a PhD student to where you're like, oh wow, that makes sense, instead of them talk, you know. So I really like him. I mean, that's kind of been the big one. Jocko Willink, ex-Navy SEAL. I listen to his podcast a little bit, but yeah, podcasts are cool, man.
Yeah, well, you're gonna crush it on a classic. I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts. You do a great job, and let's just shout out a classic for a second. The first time I heard about a classic, I was doing research on. Did you hear the one with Dougal Patterson from? He's a big wave surfer out of South Africa, Dungeons. Okay. Anyway, shouts out to Dougal. I've had him on the show twice, and so I'm listening to Dan talk to him, and I'm like, a classic. What a cool name, because like, we're Americans, and like you know lots of Australians, I'm sure, and like the way they set things up is so funny. Like, so a classic is such a classic thing to say in Australia. So shouts out, big up, and Dan, respect. And
thanks, Dan.
Yeah, dude. So like last question here for you. What's the meaning of life?
What's the meaning of life? Oh man, I'm still trying to figure that one out. I think for me, the meaning of life is just experience it, you know, and just experience all the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, you know, all of it. And I think that's been the big allure with riding big waves, you know, and just is just like experiencing, you know, like what is that like, you know, and then now transitioning into like, what is it like to host a podcast? So I think, I mean, that's not all of it. Obviously, there's a lot to life. There's, you know, enjoying your friends and family, having some sort of purpose, I think, is a big part of the meaning of life. You know, like living purposefully, you know, whatever that may be. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, I dabble in a million different things. You know, I'm dabbling in being a lifeguard, being a coach, a mentor to kids, a big wave surfer. I'm just trying to figure out, like, I don't know, like what, yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out the meaning of life, you know. But I do think having some sort of, you know, purpose, I think a big purpose of mine is riding big waves, but then now I'm finding purpose in teaching kids and teaching people how to stay safe in the ocean. You know, that's like taking my passion and then trying to take it a step beyond and like get other people to conceptualize these things, and also just get people to like experience that, you know. Like, I mean, one of my big goals would be to have one of my clients or one of the kids I'm coaching to like experience big waves, and maybe they love it, maybe they don't love it, but like what what is that experience like, you know? So I think just experiencing life, man, and enjoying it, you know, and just like trying to you know, sip it all up. It goes by fast, right?
It does. It's a flash of light in a pan. Jack Akrop, dude, you've crushed it. And before I let you go, can I get one more in? You got one more?
Yeah. No, I got one more, bro.
All
And
right,
I just wanted to say before we end, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been a blessing. And yeah, no, it's a great. I always feel great. Podcasts are just fun. You just get to talk to somebody interesting, and it's cool.
yeah,
So
you
hope
ripped
to
it.
do it again.
Yeah, dude, 100%. You're a man of the ocean. You love the ocean. Wave gardens, wave pools. They're huge now. What's your take on the artificial wave?
I think it's awesome, man. I mean, I don't know how sustainable they are. I would say that would be the only downside is if they, if it becomes an issue on the environment. But that being said, I went to Waco recently with this organization, High Fives, and man, wave pools are the shit.
How was that session for you?
Instead of going on a surf trip and like maybe scoring, maybe not scoring, it's like you go to Waco and you know that you're gonna score. And that session was amazing. I mean, the wave was a lot better than I thought it would be. You look at it on videos, you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then you get there and you see the first one come through, and you're like, holy shit! And we had like a 12-hour private session, so it was just, I think I surfed like 11 hours and 45 minutes of that, just till I couldn't move anymore. And it's just the same wave over and over. Just, yeah, it's amazing. I really think I think it's probably the future of surfing, because now it's going to allow a kid from freaking Texas to potentially make it on the WSL who may not have had the experience to go on a surf trip. He didn't have the resources or whatever to go somewhere else. So I think it's amazing.
Gonna blow the whole thing up.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll see. But from what I've heard, like a lot of people are like, oh, the beach though is still the place to go. So Mother Nature.
Totally.
Yeah, you gotta get that taste. But you gotta go. You got something to go do. And Jack Akrop, I can't thank you enough again for joining us.
No, thank you, man.
Yeah, bro. And I wish you the best of luck today. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, dude.
Have a great day, man. Thanks so much.
All right. Peace out, everybody. Oh, like, follow, and hit up a classic. Hit up Jack. I'm going to put the stuff in the comments below. And with that said, peace out.
Thank you, brother.
Later, dude.
Have a great one, man.
You too.